Welcome everyone to another edition of Touring the AFC South. And we've got big news coming out of Nashville, Tennessee. Julio Jones is now a member of the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans traded a 2002 second round pick, 2022 second round pick, and a 2023 fourth rounder to Atlanta for Julio Jones and a sixth rounder in the 2023 draft. And of course, I'm not going to know all the inside of all the information. So I had to reach out and make a call real quick to a guy that would know all the information. That would be Mr. Turron Davenport. Thank you for coming on, man.
How you doing, man? I appreciate you having me on, bro.
And before I go too far, I got to also mention he is the host of Talking with TD. Comes on 102.5 The Game in Nashville. Also, you can catch it on all your streaming devices, your Spotify, your iTunes, things like that. And you can also catch him, writing for ESPN and also showing up with the bow tie swag on TV.
Well, we do.
Well, Julio Jones is officially a Titan. So what can you tell us? How did this all come about?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a trade and even just an idea. I asked John Robinson about that, and he said when Julio Jones became available, it's something that they started to entertain and they worked through, and they spoke with the Falcons. Obviously, the ties there with Arthur Smith being a former offensive coordinator and longtime coach with the Titans. There's clearly going to be an open line of communication, but there's also conversation between Wayne Fontenot and John Robinson. And they made the deal happen. And I think it was really good for the Titans just being aware of the situation the Falcons were in. And they more or less took advantage of it. And I know people will say, well, the guy's 32 years old and he's coming off an injured year and he has a high cap number. And all of these are true. But you look at just a couple of years ago, Mohamed Sanu was dealt for a second round pick. So there's no comparison between the two players. And I just think, even though he's a shell of himself, Julio Jones is still a legit option opposite A.J. Brown. And then there's one more thing that you got to put in there, and that's the fact that you have a top-level player with added motivation and something to prove.
Right. You don't ever want to poke the bear or say anything that kind of hype them up even more than what they already are, right?
Yeah, that's basically what it boils down to.
Now, one thing I actually was trying to do is I'm just imagining this offense, and there's one guy, and I've heard plenty of people talk about it, that should be excited about this move, and his name is Derrick Henry. I mean, can you just explain to everyone how he should be excited about this move?
Yeah, well, I actually posted a stat. The Titans faced 8 men in the box, which, as you know, is designed to slow the rushing attack down. They faced that 23.5 times, percentage of the times last year. No team in the league faced it more. So for sure, Derrick Henry is going to have a bit of an easier path. The thing that's so interesting with him is even against 8-man fronts, that guy still finds a way to get his. And when you have a home run hitter like Henry, it is a bit easier to get those long runs, because once you get to the second level of the defense, it's curtains, because there's not really much there after that second level to stop you. But it just, for Derrick Henry, he's going to be happy about this trade. Alabama brother, a fellow guy who played for the Crimson Tide, but then just the fact that how much it's going to keep opposing defenses honest. And for Derrick Henry, another thing to consider is he's not that guy. Like, you may not always have to turn around and go shoe to shoe and give him the football when you want to snatch back momentum. You could feed Julio Jones. You could feed A.J. Brown. You could run the short, quick routes, that quick passing game with Anthony Firkser. And then you got Josh Reynolds, who can stretch the field too. So all of this equals a very good situation for the Titans. It just is all based upon Julio Jones being healthy. That's the big part of it.
Now, you mentioned Josh Reynolds. He was another addition this offseason. Now you've got A.J. Brown, because a big question was who was going to be the third wide receiver. Nobody really had an answer there. Now you've got Julio Jones to go along with Josh Reynolds and A.J. Brown. Now with those three, and also with the offensive coordinator talking about moving around A.J. Brown, how can you imagine the different formations that they can line up in? I mean, could we possibly see Julio in the slot as well as A.J. Brown?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, to be honest with you, Dez Fitzpatrick is a guy that I felt would be, anytime I asked about, the three receivers, he was a guy I felt would be the third receiver. And one of my guys, Charles Barnes of Barnes University, he's another guy like yourself doing their own thing and doing it well. He had mentioned Dez Fitzpatrick as someone that also has a lot of pressure off him. And it's totally true. No one's going to be talking about him now or even thinking about him now. So he could come along and progress without being thrown into the fire. I'm sure Dez would want to be in the fire because he wants to play and perform. But long story short, it helps him. So I think that's something else to factor. As far as guys in the slot, and I just actually wrote about this, is really going to be good for the Titans. It just, when you want to take guys like, let's say you're going against the Vikings, right? You want to get A.J. Brown away from Patrick Peterson. Okay, no problem. You could do that, but moving them across the formation, because they're not always going to have a guy like Peterson in cat coverage. And then you have other corners like Richard Sherman. Let's say you want to get, Julio Jones away from Richard Sherman. Okay, well, Richard Sherman doesn't bump inside and cover slot receivers. So that's one way you can move him inside, having that versatility. And Mike, look at the Ravens game. If you remember the beginning of that game, A.J. Brown was having his way with Marlon Humphrey, who's a very good corner. But what happened is you're taking him away from the outside where he can use the sideline as his friend. You play the position, you understand that, to put him inside to where it's a two-way go. So now A.J. can give him this and come off and fade, right? He can give him this and get him to turn this way and come inside and catch the ball across the middle. So there's different things. The two-way go is absolutely there. So when you can move guys around, that's the type of benefit that you get. And all three of them with you can even go back to Cam Batson, right? You talk A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, Josh Reynolds, Dez Fitzpatrick, Cam Batson. These are five guys that you could play anywhere in the formation. And that's huge. Not to mention, don't be surprised if you see Julio Jones or A.J. Brown working from the backfield as far as in some of those type of packages. Not taking handoffs, but running routes out of there.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I remember one time when they ran AJ in motion and kind of flipped him around. I remember those type of things as well. So, you definitely have added another weapon to that offense. Provided the offensive line does well, you can see Derrick Henry doing this thing once again. But does this move put the Tennessee Titans in Super Bowl or Super Bowl title contention talk?
Absolutely. Why doesn't it? I mean, nobody outside of the Ravens and maybe the Browns could run the football, 49ers possibly, as a unit. But, that's three teams that we're only saying are in the same conversation running the football-wise. The defense is the main thing to be concerned about. Will Bud Dupree start the year as Bud Dupree? Or is he going to start it as a guy working towards that person? Will Danico Autry be able to find the same success he found with the Colts? Will they be able to work those games and those stunts up front with he and Dupree and Landry and Jeffrey Simmons? Those are huge. The revamped secondary, is that going to be okay? What's Caleb Farley's status? Is Elijah Molden going to be able to start, with Kevin Johnson retiring? Is he going to be the nickel? Where's Christian Fulton in this conversation? There's so much, right? So much. Amani Hooker now as the second safety, right? Interchanging with Byron, Free, and Strong. Dane Cruikshank becoming the reserve, the sub-package guy. There's so much that you have to consider. And then that's not even to mention the defensive coordinator now being the actual defensive coordinator and going from position group to position group. So, yeah, I think they're a contender. But there are so many questions with that secondary and with the defense overall. And the offense as well, right? You got a brand new play caller. Arthur Smith had an uncanny ability to dial up screen passes at the right time or call that play action or those type of things. The relationship that he and Ryan Tannehill had is tied down and going to be able to duplicate that. So there are some question marks. So I wouldn't say go ahead and book your trip to wherever the Super Bowl is going to be. this season, but I definitely would start looking at prices.
All right. So I'm going to throw a question at you about just numbers when it comes to A.J. Brown. I'm going to throw a few questions, I should say, about A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and Derrick Henry, just when it comes to their numbers. When the season ends in 2021, Derrick Henry should have X amount of yards.
1,500.
How many touchdowns?
16.
All right. I can see that. I mean, Julio with the deep threats and everything, I can see that. What is an acceptable number of yards for Julio Jones?
Anywhere from 950 to 950 minimum. Okay. You want to see 1,000, honestly.
Gotcha. As far as AJ Brown this year, do you think he goes even higher than what's that?
1,100 yards.
1,100. Okay. And out of Julio and AJ Brown, who has more touchdowns?
I'm going to say AJ Brown. And Julio, that's the one thing that in nitpicking his game to death, the touchdown totals don't always get there. I mean, I've seen years where, or I don't recall too many years where he's had double digit. A.J. Brown is trending upwards towards that 8 touchdowns, as a rookie. I think he's a guy that will have more touchdowns.
Gotcha. And, I know I'm throwing a question at you, a prediction question. It's way too early prediction. But when the Titans finish this year, they will be looking at what record in terms of that, just off of this trade alone?
Well, I wouldn't say off of this trade alone. I would just say 11-6 is where I would expect them, and I would 11-6, 12-5, and I would expect them to be on top of the AFC South.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we got all our questions in about the Julio Jones coming to the Titans. I just want to thank you for coming on, Turron, and if you can, give everybody where they can find you and find your work, man.
Yeah, for sure. At @Davenport_NFL. All of my work is there. Search Google Podcast, Spotify, iTunes, all of that. Talking with TD. You'll find the podcast there. I'm on 102.5 The Game every Thursday, 3 to 4 p.m. So those are opportunities as well, man. We just try to be all over.
I can tell you what, listening to the last episode with you and Chris Sanders going back and forth, now that had me cracking up a little bit. I got to say, man.
Always fun. Always fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on, and we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with our next segment of Touring the AFC South. We're going to get it from the Atlanta side. Thank you all.